I studied creativity. I studied creativity in Malta, and I spent the bigger part of my corporate career in the field of creativity. So I worked in training and development within a huge international corporation, and I talked and trained and workshopped creativity and innovation with a lot of different people in those days. And I've been kind of like working with any type of job pretty much you can imagine within a corporation. So whether that's finance, legal, engineering, sales, HR, leadership, like so many different types of people I worked with when it came to creativity and innovation. And I worked with them as teams, I worked with them individually, and my goal was always to help them understand how creative they really are, to create a culture that allowed for and asked for innovation, and to learn how to think differently about things, right? And pretty much I've been dealing with this topic of creativity and innovation for 10 plus years. And when I decided that I want to work as a mindset coach for athletes and athletic teams, I, for some reason, did not include creativity in that equation. I just looked at the mindset part and I thought that was it. And I realized that that is not it. That is not enough. And having creativity as part of the mix is so beneficial. It's such a differentiator for any athlete or any coach or athletic team, because it allows you to be different. It allows you to think in a way that the others don't think. So I am now on a mission to really marry the topic of creativity and all the knowledge that I have about it and all the way that I know how to teach it, how to train it, how to use it. And I want to put that in the context of sports and athletics and really like merge those topics. And I'm smiling a lot right now because I'm so excited about it. I love the topic of creativity. It's just so close to my heart. I love talking about it, and the idea of bringing all of my passions together just, makes me smile a lot. So today's episode, which is about creative problem solving, is sort of my first, at least public step to do that, to bring those two worlds together and to kind of combine my passions in a way that I am very certain is beneficial for any athlete or any coach out there listening to this. So for you, pretty much. And I'm excited about it. So before we go there, I just want to welcome you. Hello, welcome to the Healthy and Aligned podcast. My name is Lisa. I am a mindset and innovation coach for athletes and for athletic teams. And on this podcast, we talk about all things mindset and innovation, creativity and innovation that are relevant for athletes within, the world of sports pretty much. And I love to take concepts, really understand them, really dissect them and break them apart to then, have a very clear understanding of it, puzzle them back together in a way that is beneficial to creating strategies or action plans, or be very concrete on how we can use that knowledge, that specific concept, in this case today, creative problem solving, to our advantage so that we can be better athletes, that we can be athletes for a long time to come, and have a sustainable career basically within the world of sports. And I believe that mindset and the mental aspect of it is super crucial to that. Okay, so let's jump into creative problem solving. So what is it? And it's very simple. It's just finding a new or different solution to a challenge. That's it. So the problem solving part is finding a solution, right? There is a challenge, I have to find a solution. And the creative part of it is that it is a new solution. So it's very simple. It's nothing crazy and complicated. And to maybe illustrate it a little bit more, let me give you the comparison between regular, quote unquote, regular or traditional problem solving versus creative problem solving. So usually when we have a problem, we use the tools that we have. We use our past experiences to solve for that problem. We use logical reasoning for that problem. And there is sort of a very clear way of like, I see a problem, I analyze it, I have a solution. It's like a very linear process, right? And there is nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful, it's true and tested, and it is perfect for situations that call for that. So if we are talking about specific routines or like known problems where we know we have a really good solution to, that's exactly when we use that type of problem solving. So an example would be, for example, you are a coach and you analyze the video footage of your opponent during the week before the match, when you face that opponent, and you really try to understand how they play, and then you use your current game plan and match the plays that you choose to that opponent, right? That is a true and tested way of dealing with that. It happens every week around the world, in preparation for game day, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's a very good way of preparing for a game. Another way would be you're a sprinter and you feel that your start is not really good. You're not a strong starter and you want to get better at starting. So you videotape your starts and you analyze every technical detail of it, and you find out where you need to tweak your behavior and where you're not doing it the way that it's supposed to. And that's, again, a true and tested way that works really well. It helps you understand the problem and find a solution that is already out there. Now, when we talk about creative problem solving, it's basically when we do not use the true and tested ways, right? When we try different ways of coming to a solution, when we don't have that process of, problem analysis solution, but it's much more chaotic. It's not as linear as that. And we use it for problems that maybe are very complex, or problems that are new, like we've never encountered this problem before, so we have to create a new solution for this. Or maybe it's ambiguous, it's not very clear. That's where creative problem solving really shines. And it is, us going away from that linear and being more non-linear in terms of exploration, experimenting, taking risks, trying things out. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of gathering information and seeing what we can do with that information when we talk about creative problem solving. And I can give you 2 examples right now for creative problem solving within the sports world that I identified. One is Dick Fosbury. You've probably not heard his name. Maybe you did. He created the Fosbury flop. Again, maybe something you have never heard of, but I can guarantee you that you've seen it. So when you see the high jump at like the Olympic Games or like an athletic competition, and you see high jumpers and they jump over the bar like going backwards, that is the Fosbury flop, right? Because before, the athletes would jump head first, or they would take like a scissor leg jump, to go over that bar. And this Fosbury guy, he was not as good as the other people, to say it that way, and he was frustrated with that, and he knew that he still wanted to do it, and he knew he had to tackle things differently because the true and tested didn't work for him. So he decided that he was going to jump a different way, and by changing his approach, he was able to jump much higher than the other high jumpers because it was a different technique, right? It was like revolutionary for high jumping. And if you watch high jump today, everyone is jumping that specific way. So good solution apparently. So well done, Mr. Fosbury. Now, another example that I promised is the Golden State Warriors. It's an NBA, so it's a basketball team in the US, and they have changed their play style a couple of years back. So, what they did is they focused heavily on throwing 3-pointers. If you have watched basketball for a while, 3-pointers were always part of the game, no question about it. Like, it was always there, but it was not as dominant as it is today. If you've seen, for example, the last Olympics in Paris and you watched the like high-end basketball players from around the world playing against each other, 3-pointers are such an essential part of it now. If you watch any NBA game, you can tell there's a heavy focus on throwing 3-pointers. And the way that I understand it is that it's more or less rooted in the Golden State Warriors changing their style of playing and being very dominant because of that. And obviously they had like Steph Curry, for example, who is exceptional at throwing these 3-pointers, like is like no look throwing them and hitting them. So yes, they have the right environment, they had the right players to do it, but it wasn't done before that way. And they really changed it. And by changing that, again, they changed the entire industry in a way, right? They changed the way that basketball is played today because they changed it. And that was also a very creative way of looking at the game and seeing how can we do the game differently from how it's been done before. Problem solving and creative problem solving, as I said earlier, they don't hate each other at all. They complement each other. It's just different situation, ask for different type of problem solving, right? Don't be creative problem solver in every situation. That's overkill. It takes much more time. It takes much more energy. You don't have to do that, right? So be aware of when to use which type. If it's a known problem and that there's a known solution, do it. If there is clarity in it and it's been there before and it's been solved before, there's no need to always reinvent the wheel, for sure. However, if it's a bit more of a tricky situation or if it's a new situation, creative problem solving is the way to go, because you do not have the past experience or the past data necessarily that you can use to do the classic linear way of problem solving, right? We have to get there first. Eventually, maybe this is a problem that we can easily solve in the future, but right now we need to be more creative about it. And when I say that we have to find a new solution versus a tried and tested solution, this new solution doesn't have to be groundbreaking, like figuring out a new way to, high jump over a bar. It can be adapting a small part. It can be tweaking the way that you do things just differently than it was tweaked before. And I believe, and I am no expert in gymnastics at all, so I'm not entirely sure how exactly it worked, but I believe that Simone Biles used exactly that. She tweaked parts of her technique, of the technical implementation, in a way that is very different from the way that other people do it. And that's why she's the GOAT that she is. That's why there are, I don't remember, 5 or 7 jumps called after her, because she was able to do them because she has a different approach to it compared to other people. You can maybe combine different fields, put different things together to create a new idea that have never been put together in the past, for example. And just, work on existing ideas and develop them further. So again, it doesn't have to be a revolution, that new idea. It just has to be different. It just has to be unconventional in a way, Now, you might ask yourself, it's all good and well what you're saying, but why does it really matter in sports? Because the examples that I give you are extreme outliers, right? I mean, if we look at the Fosbury flop, honestly, I should have looked it up. I didn't. I have no idea when that happened, but as long as I can remember, I've only seen high jumps in that specific way. So it's been a moment, right, that this happened. And I'm giving you the Golden State Warriors, who are outliers. Simone Biles, like, she's such an outlier in her sport as well. So maybe creative problem solving is just for a couple of chosen few people, and it's not really for you. Like, why would you question the status quo? Let's go with the, trusted and proven and tested ways rather than with new ways. But let me try and change your mind on this. So within the world of sports, it's a very, very dynamic environment. No two games are the same. No two teams are the same. Your body changes, your environment always changes, your mindset changes. Like, usually there is a lot of flexibility in your environment, and you need to be flexible and adaptable as well. So sticking to rigid systems is not going to help you move freely and flexibly in a dynamic environment. You want to be dynamic as well. And a part of those dynamics are practicing creativity, practicing adapting to new situations, and experimenting. Train to experiment with different things. And those allow you then to react or adapt to new environments rather quickly, because that's what you've trained for. You've trained to react to different types of limitations. You've trained to react to different types of teams, right? And that is what creativity can give you, that ability to not get stuck, in high pressure situations. Another thing is that if you show up with creative solution, it gives you sort of a mental edge over the competition. They won't expect it because it's not how it's done, right? You're doing it differently. So if you do it differently, there's no way that they can prepare for that. They have no idea what's coming, and you push them into a reactive mode because they have to react to you coming up with something different and having a different, maybe, playbook, and that brings me then again to the point that I just mentioned. If they haven't practiced that adaptability and reacting creatively, they'll be stuck, so you have sort of like a psychological advantage when you come in with a new solution, with a creative way of doing things over them. And unless they are, on the same train as you, where they prepare for this, you kind of won. Like, there's no way that they can react to you if you do things differently. And the last thing that I like to mention in why I believe that it truly matters in sport is that within the field of creativity, we work a lot with limitations. We set different types of limitations all the time to come up with different ideas. It's a way of thinking creatively. So sometimes we impose fake limitations to a specific situation just to force ourselves to think differently. Now, within the world of sports, within life, but let's focus on sport, there are always limitations. And those limitations can come in terms of time, in terms of personnel, in terms of limited resources of some kind, and having the ability to use those limitations and actually turn them into an opportunity, which is what you do when you come up with creative solutions because of it. That is priceless, because limitations will always be there, and those limitations might even change, bringing me back to the adaptability part that I mentioned earlier. So having the ability to react to limitations with creative thinking is a huge difference maker. An example for that would be the New England Patriots. So that's an NFL, American football team from the US, and their coach, or former coach, Bill Belichick, he was very good at dealing with limitations in terms of personnel. So when key players would be injured, for example, he was very creative in changing the playbook, changing the game plan based on those key players missing, and using the other players that are still there in different ways than he used them before. So he would, put them in different positions, for example, or put them in tandems that was new and unheard of. And he did that because he was missing those key players, right? And Bill Belichick used to be a very, very successful coach. The New England Patriots were for a long time a dominant force in the NFL, and not just because of Tom Brady, but also because of Bill Belichick. So I think there is something to it when you are able to use limitations and turn them into something creative, something different, something unconventional, that then again gives you an edge over the competition. Okay, let's look at what creative problem solving could actually look like. I'm going to give you sort of like a general flow of the process of creative problem solving to give you a first idea of how it works and how you can do it, so that you can understand how it happens and how you maybe already do parts of it. Maybe not with as much intention or focus, but elements of it are probably already part of your practice and of the way that you prepare for a competition. So we start with the problem. We always start with the problem. Whether you do general problem solving or creative problem solving, it doesn't matter. You really, really want to understand the problem in detail. We want to spend some time with that, because often we see a problem and we're like, I know what the solution is, and we just jump to the solution and we put it and we think we're done, But the problem maybe wasn't what we thought it was, So spending time with the problem, truly, really understanding what really is the challenge that we're facing is super important, so we do not spend our energy solving for symptoms rather than the core of the issue. Because it could be a physical thing, it could be a mental thing, it could be a problem that is caused by the environment, by the equipment, but we really want to understand that it is physical or mental or equipment or whatever. An example would be okay, let's say you are a sprinter or you coach a sprinter who is great until, towards the end of the race, and they never figure out how to finish strong. And it's so easy to jump to the solution to say, oh, okay, that's the problem of conditioning, right? We need to train the body more for conditioning so that the sprinter has enough power to finish the race strong. So you say, doesn't finish strong, let's go there. But if you would have spent more time with the problem, you would have figured out that it's actually a mental difficulty, that the sprinter does not have, or they lose focus towards the end of the race. So they're good focusing at the start and at the first half or whatever, 3/4, and then they lose focus and they let distractions come in, and that's why they don't finish strong. So you practicing conditioning with that athlete is not going to help their mental difficulties with focusing for the entire race, right? So you're solving for the wrong problem here. And this is just I think it's a general thing to never jump to conclusions too quickly, but really spend time with the issue to really understand it as well as we can. Now that we know what the problem is, the first thing, and that's a very easy thing that I always recommend, is to take a perspective shift. Perspective shift basically, no, let me say it differently. The way you think is how you practice to think for however many years you are on this planet, right? There is a specific way that you perceive the world and you think about the world, and that you come up with ideas as well that is related to your concept and context and experience. And that is great. It has served you well. I mean, you're here doing great, I hope. So there is your way of thinking. However, if we want to find a new way of solving for a problem, thinking the same way we've always thought, is not going to get us there. We have to think differently. And one way of allowing ourselves to do that is to step out of our current shoes and to step into someone else's shoes and shift our perspective and see the thing from a different angle, from a different, like from a different person's perspective in a way. So a question that you could ask is, let's say I mentioned Bill Belichick earlier. Let's stick to American football, right? I love the NFL, so I love talking about American football. Let's think about your quarterback. Either you are the quarterback or you coach the quarterback or whatever. Is like the far throws, like the throwing game, throwing really far is not working really well, right? And we understand that this is because it's very predictable and the opponent always knows exactly what we're up to. So they prepare for it and there is, it's not happening. It's like, it's not a good strategy for us. We're too obvious with this. Okay, now let's switch perspectives and ask ourselves, how would Bill Belichick do it? How would that person, that coach, solve our problem? And immediately we start to think differently. Immediately we start to think as a top NFL coach, with big resources and, all of the great things a top coach has. And we might know how he thinks about the game and how he chooses strategies, and you start thinking completely differently. You don't have to choose Bill Belichick, obviously. You can also ask yourself, what would Mike McDaniels do? Whatever, any other coach, any other quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, for example. So if you want to use that for your own sport, if it's not American football, just pick a team that you admire. Pick a coach that you admire or an athlete within that sport that you admire and who is successful. And ask yourself, how would that person look at your problem? How would they approach it? What ideas would they have? What would they try? And you will realize that you think differently and that you come up with different ideas. You could ask yourself, what would a beginner do? Someone who just learned how to play American football and they're still at the basics, how would they do this? And often it forces us to forget all the fancy things and the knowledge that we have and really get back to the basics and, restart from there and build it up from there. And that's often very helpful as well because it takes out the complexity and it helps us to really focus on foundational pieces, within our sport. Another way that you could do is to change perspective is, I mentioned Patrick Mahomes earlier. So Patrick Mahomes was also trained as a baseball player, right? So Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback of Kansas City Chiefs. He's a very successful quarterback. He's won Super Bowls and he is known for his creative way of playing the game of American football. And he was, in his younger years, also trained as a baseball player. So he was trained as a pitcher also on the baseball field. So he has a different way of throwing the football, the American football, than a lot of other quarterbacks who have only been trained in American football, right? So he can bring in his experience from a different sport into the way that he plays American football. And you can do the same. You could look at other sports and ask yourself the question, how would someone who is, a synchronized swimmer, how would they solve our problem with our throwing game? What would they do? How would they solve it? Or a golf player, how would a golf player deal with this situation? How would they approach it? And if you have trouble doing that, ask them. You can go and meet the next golf player that you see and say, like, listen, if you were to play the game of American football and you needed to throw the ball really far into the field, how would you approach it? What's your strategy? What would you focus on? And now that I say it, golf is actually interesting because they do have different distances that they have to cover as well within their game of golf, right? Sometimes they have to hit the ball really far. Sometimes they have to put it really close, to the hole, or to position it properly. So maybe there are a lot of things that American footballers can learn from the strategies of golfers and vice versa, right? So that's a super, I think, easy, applicable, concrete tool of changing perspectives. So I always love that one. Now, I want to introduce another concept to you, and that's the idea of divergent and convergent thinking. It's sometimes referred to as the diamond. So a diamond because you open up your perspective when you do divergent thinking, and then you close it back down when you do convergent thinking. So it looks like the form of the Jay-Z diamond, right? The rock of Jay-Z. So that's sort of the shape that you can imagine for yourself. Now, divergent thinking is basically what we do when we ideate. Ideate just means that we come up with ideas. That's just a fancy word to come up with ideas, to ideate. So when we do an ideation session, we want to collect and gather and come up with as many ideas as possible. And for us to do that, we have to refrain from judgment. We have to refrain from any limitation, from any understanding of what reality is. Just go crazy, go wild. And usually the first 20, maybe 30 ideas are the ideas that we've been having for the past 10 years. And there's a reason why we're not following up on them, right? So quantity is much more important than quality in this case. I challenge you to come up with 100 ideas, with 150 ideas. And when I say as wild as possible, ignore reality, I mean it. So coming back to my American football example, maybe one idea is to get aliens involved, so they beam the ball out of the football stadium and they beam it into the end zone, Or we could maybe employ a mole that digs a hole underneath the field, and we can just, the quarterback can just roll the ball underneath the field into the end zone, for example. And that's obviously crazy. It obviously makes no sense. We're not going to have a mole or an alien in the football stadium. But what it does is that these ideas allow us to remove limitations from our thinking and think differently. Again, it's about thinking differently. And they might trigger another idea. Now let me think about it. Now I put myself on the spot here. Okay, the mole idea. Obviously, we're not going to get a mole that digs a hole under the football field, but how about instead of throwing the ball, we, move the ball in the lower parts of the spheres? How do you call that? Like, on leg height or something, instead of throwing it over the people, we throw it under the people, for example. I don't think I would have come up with that idea if I didn't think about the mole thing, or at least it triggered it. So there you go. There we have an idea to maybe do something differently than we've done it before. Move it low, the ball, instead of high. So that's why wild is good, because I just came up with a new idea that I wouldn't have come up with if I didn't go with digging a hole under a football field. And the same will happen to you, This is training. This is something you can practice. So for me to come up with this quickly is because I've been doing this for 10 plus years on a regular basis, right? And I don't shy away from, being crazy with my ideas and just saying them out as they come and not judge them in this part of the process. So one important thing is, though, to not fall in love with your ideas during this process, because sometimes we do that. Like, it's very easy for me to now think like, playing the ball low instead of high. That's it. That's what we were looking for. It's so smart. It's genius, And I'm like, that's it. We can stop the session right there. We got our solution, But maybe there are 20 other ways of doing it that are equally brilliant, and equally genius than my idea that I just had. And if you fall in love with that idea, you're going to miss out on the other 19. And I'm not sure that's the wisest thing to do. So at this point, Don't fall in love with your idea. Go crazy, go for quantity, don't judge anything. The wilder, the better, and don't fall in love with it. So those are the rules. And now that we've done that, we come to the converging part. So convergent thinking basically means that we narrow it down, we refine it. And what we do is we take our most feasible ideas, most maybe impactful ideas or effective ideas, and we narrow it down and we see what we can do with that. And either you can create some criteria, like I just said, feasibility, or maybe impact, or amount of resources needed, or whatever you think is the right criteria to do that. Or you just follow your gut, like depending on the situation. You can also just pick the ideas that you like the most, and then see if you can work with that. So now it's okay to maybe have a little crush on your ideas, and then follow up on those. And we want to really pick those ideas where we believe that there's something in it. And honestly, right now, I have no idea how throwing the ball low is supposed to look like, right? Because in my head, there's only legs. I have no idea how to get the ball across, That's the advantage of throwing high, right? Because we don't have the problem of humans in the way. But still, maybe there is something in it, right? So that brings us then to the next step, and that would be experimentation. This is where we test, this is where we iterate, this is where we learn. So we take that idea of throwing the ball super low, but far, right? And we bring it to the training field, the practice field, and we see what we can do. Like, does the ball have to spin a specific way? Does it, how do I catch that ball? How do I throw that ball? What are the conditions that we need to be able to throw that type of ball to surprise our opponents with it because they didn't see it coming? And you will try and test and get better and adapt, and you gather information of what works and what doesn't work. And that's how you eventually develop a new play over time, right? And then when you feel confident with it, you bring it to game day, and then you see how the other team reacts. And then that again is information for you. Was it easy to read again? How did they react to it? Was it, predictable? Maybe if it was, we have to do it differently, or we have to go back to the drawing board and look at those other 19 ideas that we thought were amazing and genius to use. So that is pretty much the process for you. And if you want to try that out for yourself, I think as athletes, it's always helpful for us to look at the points where we have the biggest self-doubts. Because that's where a problem is. That's where our problems are lurking and hiding. When we doubt ourselves, that's where we don't have enough confidence. And we have not shown enough action in that area to build the confidence. So understanding where we doubt ourselves gives us the areas where we can have the biggest improvements. And it's sort of like an invitation for us to explore and experiment with different creative approaches. So identify what that problem is, identify the gap that you have there that makes you doubt yourself, right? Like, where are you now? Where do you want to be? Where does the self-doubt come from? And then you start creative problem solving. You ask yourself, what would another person do in this situation? Come up with different names. Maybe, come up with names, like perspectives that are not even from the world of sports. Maybe you ask yourself what Taylor Swift would do, or Beyonce would do, or I don't know. I can't think of anyone else right now. I don't know what that says about me, but here we are. And try and come up with as different ideas and as many ideas as possible, and then experiment with that, and really tackle that problem that causes you to self-doubt yourself. Also, part of it is to understand that when we are experimenting, things will most probably not work out. That's why it's an experiment, right? So failure is part of it, and it's not failure, it's just the experiment didn't work out. So be prepared for that. Not the first thing that you try will be the brilliant genius solution. Now, if you are a coach, using creative problem solving is critical. Like, it's so important, and I don't think it's used enough. But make sure that you start using these processes of creative problem solving in your coaching practice as regularly as you can. Invite people to come up with wild ideas, with unconventional ideas. So refrain from judging them. If you have an athlete coming up to you asking you to try something, or they have this idea, don't say, oh, that won't work because, but say, great, let's give it a shot. Let's try it out. What experiments can we set up to test it, And invite your athletes to share their ideas with you, because they're out there on the field. They have a different perspective from you. And again, for yourself, use that simple tool of perspective change to work on your strategies, to work on your playbook, and create that routine of trying things out and of experimenting, and creating this culture of creativity, this culture of innovation within your field. And I think, and I'm probably going to do a separate episode on that, but it's going to hint to it now. It's important to understand when we need to be creative and innovative, and when we need to follow, the efficiency and the proven path, and, really get better at what we already do. Sort of like the difference between problem solving and creative problem solving, and they both have a place in every person's life. The same goes obviously for teams. So there are areas where we just need to drill down the things that we're good at just to get better at them. And then there are parts where we need to think differently, where we need to be creative, and start asking yourself these questions, like, where do we have to go for efficiency and where do we have to go for innovation? And I think those are very helpful questions to explore your environment and your coaching style, I believe. Okay. That is, I think, a long episode as well. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. You are as excited about this topic as I am. I'm so excited to share more about it. So next week, I'm going to talk about playfulness within sport and within coaching, because that's also a very cool, amazing tool for creativity. So I'm excited to share that with you next week. And if you enjoy this type of content, if you learn something new, if you're excited, you want to stay tuned for the next episode, make sure that you subscribe to my channel or subscribe to my podcast, or both, depending on where you consume it, and help me out this way, because I want to, continue doing this and share my knowledge and share my ideas and learn together and explore together with you. And I can do that best when I can see that this is something that you want and that is interesting to you. And with that, I'm going to let you go. And until I see you or hear you again, I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.